Namo Tansam Bhagavato Arahanto Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tansam Bhagavato Arahanto Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tansam Bhagavato Arahanto Samma Sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ Dhammaṃ Sanghaṃ Namasami. Okay, good morning. Today I'd like to just continue on with the reading from the Autobiography of Ajahn Dtun. And I just start with a few stories from his first year as a monk, and then a few from his second year, and then finishing with a story from his fourth year as a monk when he had a very major realization in his practice. At 5 p.m. on around the 27th of March, 1979, which was the new moon observance day, I just finished bathing and sat in meditation using Buddha as my object. Once the mind became calm and still, I withdrew it from this state to try contemplating the unattractiveness of my own body, and my mind became peaceful and unified in concentration once again. I continued to alternate between the two until the same doubt returned. I wanted to choose just one object of meditation. I sat in meditation until 6 p.m. and then went down to walk in meditation beside my kuti. As I walked down the stairs of my kuti and approached the walking path, I kept on thinking, how will I know which method of calming the mind is most suited to my temperament? I asked myself over and again until I stopped and stood at the start of my walking meditation path. Once again I thought, how will I know which object of meditation is suited to my temperament? I closed my eyes and instantly an Asubha image came to mind. The image of a dried up and darkened male corpse appeared to the left of my forehead. I focused on it for a short time before silently uttering, what is this? Am I just thinking this up or not? The image had taken me by surprise. I opened my eyes and started to walk in meditation. I don't know what I was thinking, but by the time I was midway along the path, I stopped due to doubting whether the image was true or not. I closed my eyes again and silently made a resolution. Supposing that I truly have merit and spiritual potential, and these visions are true, if I'm to transcend all suffering in this lifetime, then may the meditation object that is most suited to my temperament become apparent. When I finished making the resolution, something out of the ordinary happened. The first image of the male corpse came back and was placed to the left of my mental screen. The corpse was dried out but still had flesh. Then a second image manifested clearly. It was of two skeletons located at the center of my mental screen. One skeleton of a man seemed to be in complete and perfect condition. The second skeleton, which wasn't in good condition, lay on top of the male skeleton with its head resting on the male's chest. A feeling told me this was a female skeleton. I focused on the image for a short time and then opened my eyes. I wondered about what I'd seen and asked myself, hey, what is this? What's happening? Why is it like this? Am I just making this up or not? Even though I saw the images twice, I still didn't trust myself. I wondered what was happening. I opened my eyes and continued to walk in meditation. When I reached the end of the path, I stopped. I stood there and asked myself whether what I had just seen were visual illusions or not. In order to be sure of myself, I firmly established my mindfulness so as to prevent all possibility of making it up myself. I made a second resolution. If these phenomena are true, and I really have the merit and spiritual potential to attain full enlightenment in this life, then may the theme of meditation that is most suited for me present itself. The instant I finished making the second resolution, both the dried up male corpse and the image of the two skeletons reappeared just as they had before. A third image then manifested just off to the right of my mental screen. This time it was a rotting and bloated, naked female corpse. At first the image wasn't very distinct, and so I focused on it for a while until it became clearer. It seemed to be so bloated that its chest wasn't discernible as that of a female because the stomach had swollen to the same height as the chest. I focused intently on the image and threw a stone onto the corpse's chest. The stone sank into it in a way no different from throwing a stone into mud. I could then see its shape and form clearly. It was lying on its back and had long hair. After focusing on the image for a while, I opened my eyes and thought of the 3 images that I had seen at the start, the middle, and the end of my meditation path. I thought to myself, are these 3 visions really the truth? I wanted to be completely certain as to whether or not they truly arose on account of my resolution. I was still standing at the end of my meditation path and decided to turn around. For a further time, I consciously established my mindfulness, for I wanted to verify whether or not the realities that had manifested were actually the truth. So for a third and final time, I made another resolution. May the spiritual perfection of the Lord Buddha be my supreme support. If these 3 phenomena I have experienced are the truth, and if I have sufficient spiritual potential to attain full enlightenment in this very life, then may I have some kind of experience as verification during the Patimokkha tonight. When I finished making the resolution, I concentrated my mind by continuing walking meditation until hearing the 7 p.m. bell signaling the monks to the Patimokkha. At the time, I didn't know how I could have made these resolutions because I'd never made resolutions of this kind before, nor had anyone ever suggested that I do so. The volition arose spontaneously. Once I continued with walking meditation, I didn't think anything more about it. I actually forgot all about the matter because I directed my mind to cut off all thoughts and emotions so as to concentrate the mind and keep it in the present moment. When I heard the bell, I prepared myself and walked to the Apostata Hall to attend the Patimokkha. At about 7:30 p.m., Lumpur Cha began leading the community of monks in the preliminary chanting. As soon as he did, I closed my eyes and joined in. A few moments later, something completely unexpected began to happen. It felt as though pus was trickling out from my entire body and was soiling my robe. It seemed as if the pus was going to drip from my body onto the floor of the hall, so I opened my eyes, thinking to find a way to prevent the floor from being soiled. It was only when I opened my eyes that I could see, contrary to what I was feeling, there was no pus to be found seeping from anywhere, though at that time I really believed that it was oozing out of my body. What I experienced were merely feelings. When I closed my eyes again to continue with the chanting, I again felt that pus was flowing out from my body, and so I opened my eyes only to find that it wasn't. I closed my eyes once again, but this time thought to survey myself. I had the impression that my body was rotting with pus flowing from it. At times I focused my attention on the feeling, while at other times I didn't due to my not being overly interested. While chanting, if I turned my attention, I would always see my body rotting with pus oozing from it. When the chanting finished, all these phenomena disappeared. After the preliminary chanting, the Patimokkha was recited. I sat and listened with my hands in Anjali. I wondered why it was that I should experience such feelings during the chanting, for I had completely forgotten about the resolution I had made. I pondered on this until realizing that it was probably due to the resolution I had made earlier in the evening. May I have some kind of experience at tonight's Patimokkha, so as to be a verification of the phenomena I have experienced. It turned out that a 4th event really did take place at the Apostata Hall. Ever since then, I've been confident that Asubha Kammatthana was the meditation object most suited to me, and that contemplating the body was the correct way to practice. In my heart, I didn't take great pride in the outcome of my resolution, nor was I as excited by the occurrence as I should have been. If I were a layperson, I would probably be so excited that I would forget myself. The events only made me more confident and certain as to Asubha being my appropriate meditation object. I no longer held any doubts about practicing Asubha. The reason I didn't feel excited or take pride in the events that had taken place was because regardless of whether or not these phenomena were true, the conditions of the resolutions were still a long way off in the future, and I shouldn't feel pleased about events that have yet to come. Even if they were true, if I were to stop putting forth effort in my practice, then how could they come about? For this reason, owing to the fact that the future is still yet to come, I shouldn't hold to any expectations or think too much about it. I should just press forward with my practice. The most correct thing to do would be for me to be solely in the present as best I can. It doesn't matter what the future might hold if I've already given my best effort now. Since then, I turned to contemplating the body as a supa, as a means to enter samadhi. Once the mind saw this, it would become soberly disenchanted and let go of its grasp on the body to unify in concentration. At other times, I would focus solely on the mind without watching the breath so as to make it peaceful. I would be aware of whatever thoughts arose and reflect on the fleetingness of the thoughts until the mind was stilled. I would alternate these two approaches, contemplating a supa and watching the mind, as a means of entering samadhi. One day in early April, I went with a group of monks to take the meal in a layperson's home. While there, I practiced looking at both the monks and lay people as being a supa. Sometimes solid Watpapong, when my mind became peaceful during walking meditation, I would feel that my body was involuntarily transforming into a walking corpse, and I would just mindfully watch this taking place. Even though I would see natural phenomena such as this, I still wasn't very skilled at contemplating them. On the 13th of April 1979, being the day of Songkran, the municipality of Oren Chamrab invited monks from many monasteries to receive alms food at the municipal sports ground. The making of merit by offering alms food to monks and novices is a beautiful tradition of the Thai people. A large number of monks and lay people had gathered at the grounds to participate in the ceremony. All the monks sat together in a pavilion and waited for the almsgiving to commence. I looked around at the large gathering of lay people who had come to participate and saw that they were comprised of both adults and children. A feeling of pride in the Lord Buddha's dispensation arose in my heart. I felt gratified and comforted in seeing the great faith we Thai people have in Buddhism. As I viewed the lay people, I was also looking at the state of my own mind and wondered why it was that when I saw people, feelings of pleasure and displeasure arose. No sexual lust arose, that is true, but the mind still fell on either side of pleasure and displeasure. I reflected that this condition of mind is biased and incorrect. The correct attitude for the mind to hold is one of neither pleasure nor displeasure. The mind must be in the center. I then closed my eyes and made my mind calm and still in concentration. I envisioned all the people in front of me and asked myself, what is the true condition of these people? My vision of these people began to change, and I saw all the tables of food gradually disintegrating and breaking apart, while the entire crowd of people turned into rotting or dried corpses. I further asked myself, what is the final end for all these things? The nimitta then changed again. All those people disintegrated until they became piles of earth on the ground. Everyone turned completely into the elements of earth, water, air, and fire. Even all of the material objects in the area broke apart into the elements. The walls surrounding the sports ground appeared to disintegrate, and a breeze blew through the grounds, making me see that there was absolutely nothing there. No more people or material objects, just the presence of emptiness. All that appeared to remain was the ground with the dusty wind blowing. Upon seeing this, I asked myself, what was the original constructed state like? Instantly, the elements reunified to become a crowd of people again, with all the tables and other material objects returning to their former state. When I withdrew from concentration and opened my eyes to see the crowds of people again, my mind felt completely indifferent and equanimous. This was quite unlike when I first arrived, because my mind no longer held any feelings of pleasure or displeasure towards the people I was looking at. The mind was bright and buoyant, while also being composed and neutral. In my heart, I sensed that the state of absolute mental purity must be like this, experiencing neither attraction or aversion. When the time came to receive alms, it seemed as though I was walking with my bowl, but there were no people there. Around the 26th of April, 1979, I traveled to Bangkok with 2 other monks for a meal invitation. After the meal, we had some free time, so my 2 friends invited me to go see an autopsy at the Sudhīro hospital. On that particular day, there were 3 autopsies, 2 men and 1 woman. The female corpse had died 2 or 3 days before, and the body had bloated slightly. While contemplating her corpse, I felt surprised, because it seemed that I had seen this corpse before. I then remembered that this corpse was similar to the one I saw in March when I made a resolution. The bodily characteristics of this corpse were very similar to those in the nimitta, the only difference being that this corpse had decayed less than in the nimitta. If the fresh corpse were more rotten, it would have been the same. I felt quite normal and experienced no fear or excitement as I watched the hospital staff perform the autopsies. I actually felt indifferent. Because I had frequently had vivid asubha nimittas, what I was seeing all seemed rather dry and unimpressive. Very ordinary, really. I thought it couldn't beat the asubha visions that I'd been having. My heart, however, felt quite different when I left the autopsy room, for it felt extremely powerful and everything appeared to be empty. When I left the hospital, the streets outside were filled with people, cars, and buildings, but strangely, I wanted to walk right through all of them. I didn't want to alter my course for anything because it seemed there was absolutely nothing in my way. Nevertheless, I established and maintained my mindfulness for the 3 or 4 hours that things remained like this. The natural phenomenon which manifested showed that the mind was seeing the elemental nature of all things and penetrating through their emptiness until becoming the space element. While the 3 of us were staying at a sangha dwelling in the grounds of a layperson's home, I experienced some strange feelings towards the lay visitors that came to chat with us. I perceived the people to be lumps of something that had been placed there. They all looked the same, with sound coming from them when they spoke. Their bodies appeared to be mere heaps of elements. Involuntarily, my mind began to change slowly from seeing the seated lay people and their different sized bodies as heaps of elements to seeing them as all being the same size in every way. It was as if the bodies of all the visitors who came to talk to us were lifeless, just lumps of elements. At that time, I found people to be so tiresome. I only wanted to return to the monastery. All the different phenomena that I had experienced can only be experienced for oneself, that's for certain, because they arise of their own accord. Soon after, I traveled to Wat Bung Lat Yuan in Ayutthaya for 2 or 3 days before returning to Wat Pong. One evening rain was lightly falling. At about 6 p.m. the bell rang calling the monks to the evening meeting. When I arrived at the meeting hall, there were still hardly any monks there, so I sat in meditation waiting for the meeting to start. After sitting for a short time, my mind unified in concentration and a nimitta arose. I saw my body begin to change, with my flesh being blended with gold. Recognizing this as a nimitta, I paid it no attention, and I thought to myself that I have to get past it. I therefore withdrew my mind from concentration and tried refocusing it. Again, I got stuck in the same place, and it seemed as if my body, arms, and legs had turned completely into gold without a trace of any normal flesh. I didn't want to give any attention to the vision, and so again I withdrew from concentration. I applied my mind to another attempt, and it gathered again in concentration. This time it appeared that my whole seated body was shining gold. I focused on the vision because it wouldn't go away. My entire body was golden, all shining and lustrous. There was even a golden flame on the top of my head, just like on a Buddha statue. I watched the image for a short time before withdrawing from samadhi. As I did, I heard the bell start the evening meeting. A large number of monks and novices had assembled in the hall and were beginning the evening chanting. Once having withdrawn from samadhi, I considered the phenomena that had just arisen and saw that they came into being only to pass away. The visions had no self-entity and should not be clung to as having such. I established mindfulness and gave no more attention to the phenomena that had arisen until about 2 weeks after arriving back at Wat Pong. Some days when I focused attention on the body, I would see my whole body as being made of gold. Regardless of whether I was walking, standing, lying, or sitting in meditation, my body would always appear to be golden. When I walked, it seemed as if I was a walking Buddha statue, and when I sat in meditation, I was like a statue of the Buddha seated in meditation. Sometimes I focused on this perception, and at other times not, but it remained like that for about a month and a half, from mid-May to late June. I just couldn't see of what benefit these visions could have, so I paid them no attention. So now let's skip forward to his second year as a monk. On the 19th of December, I was almost gored by a water buffalo while walking for alms to a local village. I usually walked with 2 other monks, but on that day I went alone because a number of monks had been invited to take their meal at a layperson's house. The alms route passed 2 villages which are about 2 kilometers apart from each other. Normally, when there were more monks, we divided into 2 groups to create 2 routes, with each group going to a different village. Both villages had lay people with strong faith, so I chose to walk to both so that all would have the opportunity to give alms. If one walks along the road, it's a round trip of 6 kilometers from the monastery to both villages. I felt that I didn't have enough time to walk to both places by myself, so I set out early at about 5:30 a.m. and took a shortcut across the paddy field embankments. When I was about 250 meters from the road going into the village, I saw 4 buffalo walking along another embankment approximately 50 meters from me. They had been let out from the village by their owner and released to graze for the morning. The instant I noticed them, all 4 proceeded to cut across the paddy field and walk directly towards me. This gave me an odd feeling. The manner of the buffalo didn't look right and was not to be trusted. I recollected the words of a fellow monk who said, "The buffalo in this area are very aggressive and at times have almost gored monks. The owners of some have to cover the animals' eyes with their hands to prevent them from seeing any monks walking by." Remembering this, I looked to the 4 buffalo. They consisted of a mother, a bull, and their 2 calves. The mother led the way for her 2 calves, while the bull kept to the rear. As I walked, I kept a constant watch on them, while also extending feelings of metta towards them, but I felt a strange foreboding. When I came within 25 meters of the buffalo, I noticed some abnormal behavior in the mother. Instead of leading the way for her 2 calves, it turned around to take up the rear and walk beside the bull. She and the bull proceeded to hurriedly push the calves forward with their horns. The direction in which they were pushing the calves towards was a stretch of the route I had to take to enter the village. Once they had driven the 2 calves off the embankment and into a field, the male continued to drive them along. I had noticed things didn't look right when the female began to push her calves forward, so I concentrated my mind on extending metta to all 4 buffalo. As I walked, I never let them out of sight. By the time I was close to them, they had already passed the route I was walking. They were 2 or 3 meters away from me on an adjacent field. The female had stopped and stood to the rear with its back to the route I was taking. As I stepped onto the corner of the embankment that I had to walk along, the buffalo had almost walked to the field's opposite end. The female turned and jumped onto the embankment opposite to me, which was about 10 meters away. Its movements were like those of a boxer about to jump up into the ring. I remained cautious the whole time. Then it started charging towards me like a boxer not waiting for the bell, leaving his opponent wondering what the other is angry about. From the time the buffalo jumped up on the embankment, my mind immediately gathered and became one-pointed, calm and concentrated. I didn't think about anything at all. I had no concerns, not even for my own life, but I did think this time it's going to get me for sure. My heart possessed only metta as its weapon of defense. I thought to myself, I've come here to develop the practices of a samana, practicing with an aim to seek out the truth and transcend all suffering. I have no intention to harm anyone. I'm of harm to no being at all. As I stood there, my eyes remained fixed on those of the buffalo, extending metta without thinking anything at all. The charging buffalo stopped only 4 or 5 steps away from me. It stood and thrashed its horns about for a while before going down from the embankment to walk back to the corner it had previously been standing at. The whole incident was very strange. Once it had left the embankment I was standing on, I continued to walk, but only took a few steps forward when it again came at me. It paid no attention to its owner's shouting and came charging straight towards me like before. The situation was serious. I focused my mind and thought, if in a past life I've ever harmed or done you wrong, then go ahead and charge into me, but may there be no more feelings of ill will or vengefulness between us. When the thought had finished, the buffalo stopped short just 2 or 3 paces away. As I gazed into its eyes, I could sense that it didn't mean to be aggressive. Its eyes seemed merely to express concern for its calves. It was probably afraid the two were in danger because I was walking in the direction that they had to pass. A mother's love for her offspring makes her protective. Watching the whole incident were 2 or 3 people who were warming themselves by a fire near the village. One was probably the owner, and he ran shouting, trying to drive the buffalo away. He then hit the animal to drive it along. I thanked him and said I was all right. I told him not to hit the animal because it was only protecting its calves. The moment it appeared that the buffalo was going to run into me, I could feel my mind quickly gathering in concentration. It felt as though my mind was floating in the air above, watching 2 objects about to collide. I thought my body was going to get trampled for certain, and I probably would not survive. I pictured it just like 2 trains colliding. In my heart, however, I felt no fear or aversion, nor was I even slightly startled. Instead, I felt normal without any worries or concerns at all, not even for my life or body. It's hard to describe accurately, but I felt very much at ease. On another morning, I was returning from alms round with a more senior monk, maintaining mindful restraint of the senses as usual. As we walked out of the village, I looked at the sandy earthen path back to the monastery. I noticed the path was completely covered with an animal's footprints, but I didn't know what kind. I asked the other monk, "Ajahn, what type of footprints are these?" He turned around to look and asked, "Which ones?" "Those ones," I replied as I pointed to the ground. He laughed and said, "Done, those are chicken footprints. Don't you know?" He then said, "You certainly never let your mind go out, do you?" I could see he understood that I didn't send my mind out to other things. It had been almost 2 years since I ordained and came to live in the Northeast. In all the rural villages that I've walked for alms, it's normal for most villagers to raise chickens. Never before had I noticed their footprints, though, because previously, if ever I saw chickens, I would see them as rotting or dried out carcasses that were running about, so I never looked to their footprints. That was the first time since ordaining that I'd noticed chicken prints. This incident is still embedded in my memory to this day. There were times when, if I were to look at anyone who came into the monastery, it was as if their skin dissolved into thin air, to leave only a state of emptiness. This occurred the instant I looked, and was like that for about a week. Frequent contemplation of the body brought with it the arising of spontaneous sabhava dhammas, which in turn caused the mind to see phenomena as being merely elements. At times I sat in meditation and saw my body all shriveled and dried up, or sometimes rotting. When walking both in and outside of formal meditation, I would always see my body as being something foul and unattractive. As I continued to cultivate seeing my own body as a supa while sitting and walking in meditation, it was as if I'd come to a certain point and my mind would slip into a mode, causing a stream of sabhava dhammas to arise automatically. For example, while contemplating, I would frequently see the body separate into elements and then automatically disappear into a void. It all happened in a single mind moment. Regardless of whether I was sitting or walking at that time, all bodily consciousness disappeared to be replaced by sabhava dhammas such as these. Nevertheless, I considered it unnecessary to contemplate such self-arisen phenomena. When I passed any rice fields on alms round, if there were farmers at work in the field, then I was able to concentrate my mind and mentally destroy the farmers by instantly making them revert to their primal condition of being 4 elements. The bodies would break apart and dissolve into the earth and water. Then I'd reconstruct the 4 elements back into the original person. In May, there were times when I do walking meditation and contemplate the elements. I would see the body as being only the water element floating in the air. Outside of that, there was only emptiness. There was another period of about 2 weeks during which, when I do walking meditation, contemplating the bodily elements, I would see my whole body turn into a mass of solid earth, pacing back and forth. The earth had cracks throughout like cracked pottery. Even outside of meditation, this Sabhava Dhamma would still manifest. During this period, whenever I focused on my own body, I'd see it as being made of clay. Each day before eating the meal, there was a period of 15 to 20 minutes that I was free to sit in meditation. When it was time to start eating, I would do so, but continue contemplating. One day it seemed that the food in my mouth had turned entirely into earth. I almost spat it out, but was quick to reflect and see my body as being made of earth too, so it was as if earth was eating earth. It was only by reflecting like this that I was able to continue my meal. At times when walking for alms, my mind would still be in the familiar mode of contemplating a supa, and would see the monks walking in front of me as corpses. I had to deliberately reflect so as to bring my mind back to an objective, normal state. In the month of June 1980, when practicing concentration in any of the 4 postures, I would for the most part see the nature of all phenomena as being comprised of elements. The various sabhava dhammas that rose could possibly cause a person to become even more deluded or misled if the mind identified with them as being products of self, instead of seeing that it's entirely natural for these things to arise and disappear. When sabhava dhammas arise, if the meditator lacks wisdom to reflect on them with an aim to uproot all self-identification, they can attach to and identify with them, thinking, I'm great, I'm this, I'm that, causing them to become even more deluded and mistaken. These things should be used to give up or let go of one's self-identification. Anyone possessing the discernment to know how to correctly reflect on these conditions can gain wisdom from them. On the 25th of June 1980, different sabhava dhammas manifested. That morning I set off an alms round with some friends. On the way back to the monastery, Wat Papong, 2 monks were walking ahead of me while I walked behind, chatting with a novice. While talking, I also concentrated my mind by focusing on my body as I normally did. However, I couldn't see my body because it had completely disappeared. And all that was there were the 4 elements, floating and revolving in the air, just like someone stirring cake mix in a large bowl. There were only the 4 elements spinning around and the mind's knowing presence. On returning to the monastery, I told my friends about what had happened. It began to feel like something was about to overflow from my mind, so I went to the eating hall and sat in meditation. As I closed my eyes, I saw the 4 elements reassemble again. I was aware that I was perceiving things more clearly, and that what I had seen earlier was the state of emptiness, the complete absence of a self-entity. I knew that ultimately my body was only the 4 elements. The body could not be discerned, there were only elements. Tears streamed from my eyes while thinking of all the beings that still hadn't seen the truth that I had just seen. My heart brimmed with feelings of boundless kindness and compassion towards all beings. I wanted them to know and see as I did. I also recollected the boundless goodwill and compassion of the Lord Buddha. I thought how fortunate I was to have the merit to see the truth that had manifested. These thoughts caused an outflow of tears that wouldn't stop, until eventually I had to leave the eating hall. I rushed off to a friend's kuti nearby as the tears kept flowing. When I got to his kuti, I bowed 3 times to the Buddha statue inside. However, on the 3rd bow, I sank down. The recollection of the Lord Buddha's infinite compassion had moved me to tears. And now I'd like to just skip forward a bit to a story I think that took place during his 4th year as a monk, when he had a very major realization in his practice. On the 24th of June, 1982, my mind didn't want to think at all, as my awareness was firmly established, abiding only in the present moment. It had been sharp and alert all day without feeling any sleepiness. That evening when I sat in meditation, my mind saw the body in such subtle detail that it was as if my body had dissolved into the space element. There was absolutely nothing there. The state was similar to the body being totally empty or expansively open. It's a state I can't correctly describe. When I finished sitting meditation, I got up to do walking meditation. My mindfulness was good, and I walked until my heart felt content and at ease. By 9:30 p.m., I went up to my kuti and lay down. I continued practicing samadhi, keeping mindfulness established at the mind. I then observed the arising of a sabhava Dhamma. A bright ray of light came racing through, and my mind moved outwards, shedding off its rust or the anusaya in the process. I witnessed the mind completely abandoning satisfaction and dissatisfaction. I was overcome with a feeling of indescribable amazement. The moment the mind moved outwards and shed its rust, a knowing arose within. The mind has separated away. From where mindfulness and clear comprehension came from, I don't know, but it was much greater than before. The following morning, I looked upon everything as being just nature. My mind was so cool and tranquil, experiencing only an indescribable lightness and ease. If anyone said anything inappropriate, it didn't affect my mind in any way. I knew that all feelings of satisfaction and dissatisfaction had now been shed. My mind has separated away and let them go. When I saw other people, I fully comprehend that they're all the same. I also had a greater understanding of each person's emotions or personality and know their state of being is normal and natural for them. Within everybody, I see only emptiness, completely open. There is no me or them. This feeling is one that I had never known or experienced before. The following morning, I wanted to cry when thinking of myself and the folly of my naive and deluded heart that had enjoyed indulging in the emotion of satisfaction without ever thinking to rid itself of the suffering that it caused. Instead, I had always been going along with my own preferences and wishes. In truth, it's only a small mental adjustment that's needed. I had mistakenly perceived myself to be stuck on something else, whereas in actual fact, I was only stuck on the emotion of satisfaction, my wish to please others. Once I'd corrected and gone beyond this, everything became lighter. My heart remained cool and peaceful throughout the entire day and night. I can't adequately describe just how tranquil and aware the mind was. I felt that my mindfulness and concentration were fully developed for this level of practice, as my mind is one-pointed in all postures and activities. I did not necessarily need to practice sitting or walking meditation. The mind was completely at ease, and I saw everyone as being a part of nature without feeling any satisfaction or dissatisfaction. It was perfectly balanced and objective, without moving to either side by approving or disapproving of anyone as being attractive or unattractive. They are all viewed impassively. It's like having once abandoned feelings of satisfaction or attraction towards the body. Everybody becomes exactly the same, without anybody being more special than another. Both the young and old are of the same natural condition. All are impermanent and devoid of any entity that could be called a self. My heart has no worries or concerns for anybody, not even for myself. The mind has separated away. It's no longer attached to the body, whether it be my own or somebody else's, nor is it attached to any material objects. When seeing, I just see. When hearing, I just hear. The mind moves in the midst of peacefulness and tranquility. Absolutely everything in the world seems to be merely elements that comply only to nature, and as such, the mind has irrevocably let go of its attachment and identification with the body. As a result, greed and aversion have finally been extinguished, and all sexual and sensual desire has permanently died out. The work of body contemplation has come to a conclusion, and so has the reflection on the loathsomeness of food. Having let go of all attachment towards the body, the task of food reflection no longer has a purpose. Since I ordained, there has never been a day that I've eaten food with desire. Okay, I'd just like to leave it there. Are there any questions or comments?
I have a question. Is that last bit where he's kind of reporting the results, kind of struck me as, this kind of struck me strange. It's not very common people do that, especially in court when, with the Pagano cutters, I think, who will look against that. But yes, I was just wondering if they comments about that. But this, I don't know.
Yeah, Pachitya, Pachitya 9 is, I think it's Pachitya 9. Honestly, reporting one's actual attainment to a layperson is a Pachitya. It has to be quite direct to be an offense, and he's not really directly claiming this attainment directly to a layperson, so in that case I don't think it would be an offense, but he's somewhat indirectly referring to the attainment of Abhayagiri, where all sensual desire is gone. The other side of the latent tendencies have passed away. But Ajahn Dtun got criticized for the same thing. He talked about his realization of arhatship in response to a question about Maranusati from a lay woman. But even then he didn't. It was like one step removed from being absolutely direct.
Do you have a sense for like how one is to take that, or what the...
Get super inspired, practice.
Maybe I can just also add, in kind of deciding to read from this book in particular, I felt like this is really it's a very special book because, like you said, like for the most part, the meditation masters, they're very guarded about their practice, and in most of the other spiritual biographies that I've read, it's very few details about kind of the things that they've experienced, or if it does include their experiences, it's kind of maybe stories that other people heard them tell. Like, for example, the biography of Rinpoche Cha is very much like that, whereas it's just a lot of stories that people had heard him tell over the years. But this is really, I think quite special and unique in that he really goes into incredible amount of detail just in the things that he experienced. And on one level, it's kind of like there's the Patimokkha rule that we're not really supposed to talk about our attainments or things that we've experienced in meditation, but it's also kind of like, on a rare occasion, if there is a great meditation master like this who really goes into a lot of detail, I think it can be incredibly helpful for some people. Like for myself, I found it just extremely inspiring reading about these kinds of details about his practice and what he experienced.
And sometimes we can develop ideas or views about like what anagamis or arhants or attained people should be like, and then the reality of it doesn't always match our preconceived ideas about them. So then we might question why are they doing that? Like in this time that Ajahn Mahabua talked about his attainment of arhantship in this very public setting. Then the next day there was another, and he cried. He started crying when he was talking about it. And then the next day a layman asked him, well, I thought arhants weren't supposed to cry. And what was that all about? And Ajahn Mahabua is just kind of like, how would you know that? You have no idea what you're talking about. I think he was also very insulting toward this layman who asked that, but I won't repeat what he said.
Where is that line? So like, yeah, he doesn't say, I became an Anagami, but he says like, he just talks a little bit about his experience of meditation. Is there a line there?
Well, when he says he knew that the Asuba practice had come to completion, and that the food contemplation had come to completion because there was no more chance of sensual desire arising in the mind. That's a clear allusion to the attainment of Anagami, because that's like the very definition of the Anagami attainment.
So that would be, yeah, that's like saying, I fully realize the Four Noble Truths. It's like, you basically, yeah.
It's that's like a description of the non-returner attainment.
So that would be, yeah.
That the anusaya, the latent tendencies of greed and aversion, have completely passed away, but there's still some ignorance remaining.
So in the wordage of the rule.
The wording of the rule, yeah.
I think I'm trying to understand is, if he were saying those things with the intention of making a claim that people would understand as a claim to Anagami, and that he knew that that was a colloquial use, or that that was his intention to do that, then it would be an offense.
And if it's specifically directed toward unordained person,
Yeah,
or
for
unordained people.
Yeah, not to monks.
Yeah.
Just curious.
But you would have to have that intention to make want to put that out there and make people believe that.
It could be also that in his mind the autobiography is more geared towards a monk readership rather than lay readership, so that it wouldn't be an offense in that sense if that was his intention.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.